You are a luthier here in Eastern Connecticut. Can you tell me a little bit about what a luthier is and what you do?
I build guitars. And a luthier it comes from the word lute. It's a very old word and rather unusual. Of course, coming from the word lute, it means anyone who makes stringed instruments or repairs them. But nowadays, most commonly it refers to guitar makers, because violin makers like to be distinguished as violin makers or cello makers or whatever.
So they're separated.
Yes. Well, they think that they do. Well, they do. They do something quite different.
Interesting. Now, you design your own instrument, correct?
Yes.
And then you build it, which this all sounds very complicated and mysterious to me. Let's start off with some of your pictures.
Okay.
So we can get an idea of exactly what we're talking about. And you brought one of your guitars today, which is going to be really fun to look at,
yes,
along with another special instrument. So let's take a peek at the photos.
Okay.
And then we can do a little listening and a little show and tell.
Okay. Well, that
Where is this?
Yeah, that is my first workshop, which was my dining room table.
No kidding.
Yeah, I built 3 guitars there. And I think that's a picture of the last one I was building.
Wow.
Yeah,
and this is right in your dining room.
Yeah, I made a real mess. My husband was eating roadwood dust. And he finally built me a shop in self-defense.
Oh, my goodness.
That's just an example of some of the hand tools and things that I use. There's everything. You notice the Band-Aids and a lot of those. And fish glue, everything, all kinds of different things. You have to make a lot of your own tools when you're a luthier, yes.
Is it just because there aren't tools that are exactly right, or?
Sometimes they're specific to the job, and you have to modify or make them from scratch.
Interesting.
Yes.
And dare I ask what fish glue is?
It's actually, it's similar to hide glue, which is what instrument makers use. It's actually made out of hide.
Really?
Yeah. I guess it's the mucilage in the hide.
Huh.
And fish glue is a very high example of that.
So would that be something you would use when you're working with wood, or what's the wood?
Yes, with wood.
Okay.
But I don't usually, I use fish glue sometimes, but not on guitars.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is, now this looks like the body.
Yes, that's a koa guitar that I was building, actually a baritone, which is why the sides are so deep. And I had just finished bending the sides on my bending iron.
Wow.
And there, in that picture, I'm gluing on the end block. I'm just starting to join the sides together.
Oh my goodness. So this is really the beginning steps.
Yes.
Do all guitars generally have that same shape?
Acoustic guitars.
Okay.
No, not that shape. That's a rather unusual shape also. I build a lot of times a shape that's called a craviola. And it's, I think it's superior to the other shapes.
Why
which
is
is
that? Sound?
Well, actually, when you're a luthier, you're trying, when the sides are shaped the same, you want the bass side to be kind of flabby to get the big resonant bass, and you want the treble side to be rather tight so that you can get those clear, piercing highs. So you're fighting 2 things in the same place. By blowing out that one side, you can see the bass. That happens to be a left-handed guitar, which is why it's reversed. The bass side, or no, that's not, that one is, I'm sorry, that is a regular guitar. The bass side is blown out like a lute.
Okay.
And so it gives a bigger, floppier bass side. And then the bend in the waist on the other side creates the tightness that you're looking for the trebles.
Interesting. I never realized that there were 2 sides even.
Yeah.
That's a bad thing to admit. But so the side that's on the bottom of the screen is that bass side then?
No, that's the treble side.
That's the treble side?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Wow.
And
that's something.
And I actually built 2 guitars that were virtually identical except for the shape to prove to myself that that's a superior sound.
No kidding.
And everybody agreed with me.
Neat.
I do a lot of experimental building. Most of my building is very experimental and prototypical. I design guitars.
Wow.
And that is an example of what we call flying braces, or suspended bracing. Experiments in how to release more of the top so that it's more resonant.
So this is the inside?
Yes, that's the inside of the top of a guitar.
Wow.
actually my apprentice bought that guitar before I finished it.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So that, well, the inside, all the inside structure, the brace,
Mhm.
I guess it would be bracing basically, right?
Yeah.
All that would affect the sound also.
Oh, yeah.
Anything in there is
Oh,
going
yeah.
to affect the sound. Okay.
In fact, the luthiers shave zillionths of an inch off to tune the top.
No kidding.
Yeah, on the bracing. That's again a craviola shape, and that's why the unusual shape on the back. That's the back, and that's the back bracing. And it's not completed. I haven't trimmed the ends and so forth, but you'll notice how there's a curve, an actual curve in the top. Those braces are also curved. That makes for a stronger and more resonant guitar if it doesn't have a flat back.
What type of wood is that?
That is 5A koa. It doesn't get any better. Now you can't see it because it doesn't have a finish on it, but it's very high flame.
Interesting.
And there it is again. And that one has a koa top. It's an all koa guitar. I call it the first organic guitar, and you'll see why later. And you can see the flame, the cross-hatching on there that's going from left to, well, top to bottom on the screen. Is actually the flame, and the grain runs from the top, from the, you know, from the top of the guitar to the bottom.
Wow.
And there it is with the top on, and the sound hole is in, and the bridge is on, and it's waiting for its the binding around the edges. That's, I think, Brazilian rosewood.
That's amazing. That looks like it must be really beautiful wood when it's finished,
Oh,
too.
it's very pretty. Yes.
Look at
And
the
that's the
stripe.
bending iron. If you could go back to that picture for just a moment. I don't know if you can see the little thing in the bottom right of the screen, that dirty little thing. That's my bending iron. That's what you bend the wood on.
No kidding.
Yeah, there's sap on there that's burned on.
Really?
Some of these woods are very sappy.
And this is that same guitar?
That's the finished guitar.
Wow.
And I call it the first organic. It's very unusual in that the sound hole, which will, the next picture is the sound hole close-up of it, is a cross-section. Instead of being little inlaid pieces of wood like you normally see, it's actually a cross-section of a knothole that I harvested in my own yard.
That is amazing.
And that's the close-up of it. And it's,
no kidding.
the natural fissures are filled with turquoise.
So this is a knothole you found, and then set it in.
Right. Made a very, very thin slice of it.
Unbelievable. Look at that.
And then put it in and sanded it down.
So that changes the sound of it also.
A
No?
little bit. That particular part of the guitar doesn't seem to have as much.
Really?
Yeah, I can't see that it really makes a big difference. The
Interesting.
size of the hole makes a difference, but more than the shape.
Wow. That is neat. So, oh my goodness.
That's my very busy, very messy shop as it sits today.
Really?
Yes, and the one that, on the table there, you can see just make out some clamps. I'm building the next L class, which is the guitar I have with me, which is the electric version of that organic guitar.
Neat. So when you're, I don't even know where to begin with my questions here. When you're thinking about designing, it sounds as though you will make changes in your design according to how a sound you're trying to get.
Oh, yes.
How does that process begin? Is it in your ear? You're thinking, I need to make this sound, and then you try and find the design to match, or how does that work?
Well, actually, what luthiers do as a rule is they build the guitar with bracing to a certain spec, and then at the very end, they fine-tune it. It's a fine-tuning process to make sure that all of the parts of the top are in agreement, that the thicknesses and so forth will give you certain resonances and eliminate others. In the case of the one that I'm going to show you in a minute, I was building an electric classical guitar, and I'd never built an electric guitar before, so I didn't know what I was doing. So almost from the very beginning, I plugged it in. I put the pickups in it very early, and when I was sanding the top, which has external bracing, which is extremely unusual, when I was sanding the top, I actually sanded it with the amp on, so that I could hear how it sounded from the very beginning. So it's an electric guitar all the way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, and to let you know, on this one, because I knew I didn't know what I was doing in terms of how to, there was no, because it's so thin, there was no way to shave the braces once I got it built.
Right.
So I just put them on the outside and built them into the top, and then sanded them from the outside.
Unbelievable. This is quite a process.
Oh yeah, it takes, this guitar I have 3 years into because I had to do like everything 3 times before I got it
Really?
right, yeah.
Now, are you putting the project down, so to speak, and picking it back up and working on other things? Or is
Yes,
this
yeah, it was
Wow.
coming, I worked probably 200 or 300 hours on it before I
Unbelievable.
got it to field testing capability, and then it went out and field tested, and then something broke, and then it came back, and we got it fixed finally, and it's been
No
on the
kidding.
road for about a year now.
Wow. How long have you been playing?
Oh, I've been playing since I was in my 20s, and I'm 63 now, so it's a long time. I've screwed around with guitars all my life, but I've only actually been building for 6 years.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Only 6 years?
Yeah.
What made you decide to try to build?
I sold a guitar that I'd had for 34 years that I really loved. And it's a long story I won't go into here, but once I sold it, I started trying to replace it, and I found out I couldn't really afford to. And I mean, we're talking $10,000 guitars here.
Wow.
I didn't have the money, so I figured I could build one, so I did.
Did you have any idea how to build a guitar?
No, but there's the internet. You know, there are good books, and I was fortunate in that I had bought a bunch of pearl from a button factory that closed in locally.
Really?
Yeah. And I was selling it online to luthiers to try to get money for my shop, you know, for, you know, bandsaws and whatnot.
Right.
And I made the acquaintance of a lot of luthiers because they were buying the pearl for inlay.
Okay.
And I picked their brains on the internet.
No
They were
kidding.
very, very wonderful people, yes.
Wow.
They helped me and read a lot and made a lot of mistakes.
Wow. I'm amazed you've only been doing this 6 years.
Well, I bought about 80 guitars on eBay and elsewhere that were, you know, broken.
Really?
And fixed them before I started building.
No kidding.
Yeah, some of them were pretty bad. And once I got to the point where I went, it would be easier to build a guitar than clean up this mess.
Huh.
I went, duh, and started building.
Wow. Wow. So you're really self-taught.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
which is an advantage most of the time, I think.
Do you think that's what helps you be more creative?
Yes, I think if I had somebody teach me, I would have been locked in.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So yeah, I would think it's kind of people who watch this show have heard me say this before, but we kind of pull the creativity out of kids by teaching, so to speak.
Right.
And that might have happened with your creativity also.
It might have. I'm kind of ferociously creative, but I think it just would have taken me a lot longer to get to where I was going.
Wow.
Yeah.
What type of wood do you usually use? Is there a typical wood?
Well, there are standard woods for guitars, but a lot of those standard woods are now endangered. So
What are
luthiers are trying to find alternative woods. Like the most standard wood for building a guitar is Brazilian rosewood, but it's been embargoed since 1969.
Really?
And all of the stashes are pretty well run out. I mean, nowadays a bridge out of it is very expensive. A little piece of wood,
Yeah.
you know, is very, very expensive. A really good Brazilian rosewood set, now we're talking an 1/8 inch thick, 8 inches wide, and 21 inches long, and with just a sliver of wood when you think of a tree, is about $1,000 for a good set,
No
just for
way.
the wood.
Wow.
500 to 1,000, but 1,000 for the better sets, or
What-
more.
That's unbelievable. What makes it such a popular wood? What made it the
It's the wood
choice?
of choice for all classicals. Even today, players will spend an exorbitant amount of money
Is it the sound?
in order to get the sound of Brazilian rosewood, which some people say the other rosewoods are just as good, and maybe they are. I don't have enough experience to really say. But the other woods that people build out of, you know, are walnut and koa and maple for your archtop and jazz guitars. And but a lot of people are going to, you know, other alternate woods and alternate rosewoods and things, because there's about 200 kinds.
No kidding.
Yeah, I probably have 50 or 60 woods in my shop, at least.
Really?
Oh, very expensive.
When you're in your shop and
Mm-hmm.
you're working away, do you listen to music?
Sometimes, a lot of times I have to hear what's going on. If I'm bending wood and
Right.
it starts cracking, I want to hear it.
That makes sense.
If I'm sanding, I'm actually listening. The sanding actually produces tones that I can tell if I'm getting too thin, too whatever. So a lot of times I don't, simply because I need to hear the guitar. But otherwise, you know, if I'm doing something else, I listen. And I almost don't listen to any recordings that I buy. They're almost all people that I know now. Live music that's been recorded and sent to me or whatnot. It's great.
Have fun.
Yeah, so I get to listen to my friends.
That is amazing. That's nice energy to have around you, I suppose.
Yes. Sometimes they'll come and sit and play for me while I work.
That must be fun.
Yeah,
too.
just hang out with me. I love it. I love it. It's the best job in the world, just filled with music and fine people.
You brought one of your guitars with you today.
Yes, yes.
Let's take a peek at it.
This is my flagship guitar. This is the first of its kind. It's not the first electric classical, but is that about right?
Yeah,
but it's
that's
the
about right.
first of this particular type. I call this the L class, and it's spelled E-L. The L class. I guess it's short for electric or El Classic guitar. I don't think that's proper Spanish, but anyway, that's the name. And this is the first of its kind. And if you want to see that, it has a special strap on it, which I didn't bother to take off. It's
That's
a
okay.
working guitar now.
Wow.
And if you can see the inlay there.
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of detail on here, and I'm very curious about it.
Okay.
Now, you have some stone inlaid on the guitar. Can you tell me about that?
Oh, sure. Most of it is turquoise that I slabbed out myself. You know, cut myself into slabs so that I could use it. And some of it is, there's some malachite in here, black pearl, and bits of brass I got from some wire I stole from an electrician. Well, he gave me his little end pieces, because electrical wire is some of the highest grade copper in the world.
That's really neat. So now, when you laid it in there, was there a set pattern you wanted to follow, or did that fit certain patterns in the wood, or what was the?
A combination of things. This star is the guy who owns the guitar, and it's sort of like the theme of this guitar is primeval, and it's sort of like firmament, and things are happening here, and this star is falling out.
Neat.
And this is supposed to be painted. It hasn't been painted yet. He wants to paint a world on here, and he said he would do it, so I'm going to let him. Which is why it's mismatched. I originally made it of another wood, and he said, well, don't bother. I'm going to paint it anyway. So I didn't bother, but we haven't gotten around to that. So the star is falling to earth.
Right. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So,
And this is actually a strap hitch, but it's also the symbol for the universe.
No kidding.
And the other side is the Anasazi swirl. Whoops, sorry. Is the Anasazi swirl.
Now, what
right
is
there.
that?
The original Indians in the United States were the Anasazi.
Really?
Yes, and they ended up being the Pueblo Indians and scattering out across. And this is the spiral is their symbol, or I would say they call it the Anasazi swirl. And there's a hole going right through. And we were going to use that for a strap hitch and decided to put it up here instead, so it's just decorative now.
It looks really neat, I'll tell you. Now, what type of wood is this?
Okay, the back is pattern grade mahogany,
Okay.
as is the neck, except for the inlays of, this is walnut burl here, and wenge, an African, very hard African wood, something like ebony. And there's bits of that in here, too, that you can see a piece of it here. And most of the rest, this is rosewood, and this is walnut burl also. This is a piece of oak from my yard. It's a fish diving over the edge, actually, is what it is. It's a strap hitch. And the top is the important part on any guitar. The top makes or breaks the sound.
Really?
To prove how important tops are, Torres, the famous classical builder, once built a papier-mâché guitar with a spruce top, just to prove that he said all the sound was in it. Well, not all the sound, most of the sound's in the top. Again, I don't know how it sounded, but
I'd be interested to hear that too.
yeah, this was I bought 10 barn boards from out west of red cedar, and western red cedar, and they were $1 a piece. Usually, you pay about $60 to $100 for a good top, and it was supposed to be the top I was going to practice on, but it sounded so good I kept it. Anyway, I paid $10 for the 10 boards and $50 to ship them.
And these are just boards?
They were boards with nail holes, 100-year-old weathered boards like the ones you see on somebody's porch. By the time I sanded them down, I got like 2 tops out of it, and this is one of them.
Oh my gosh.
And these little lines that you see here are the external bracing. This is where I sanded it to get the tones.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a little piece of footage here that will show you, and you'll get to hear it. It's not very good fidelity because I shot it.
Well, and and what we hear will actually be this guitar being played.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And anyway, the other thing is the bridge. There's a lot of unusual. It has a singing hole here, and it actually picks up your voice if you're playing. You can sing into it. Yeah. And sometimes I put in a little mini mic. I have different pickups I can put in. Mostly it has two pickups, one classical and one sort of Hendrix.
Interesting.
You know, one is, and this has an 18-hole bridge, which is extremely unusual.
When you say 18-hole, what is that?
Well, it has 6 here. The rendered
Okay.
6 that you would have for a steel string guitar.
Right.
And then you have usually six holes for classical to put through and tie.
Okay.
But the new movement in classical strings is to get the exact down angle and keep it. You put a hole through and then a hole back through, so you can put it through and tie it back. At any rate, so 12 holes for the classical strings.
Wow.
And this is a convertible guitar. You can use a light steel on it or a gut string, which is also highly unusual.
Oh my goodness.
So there's a great many things about this guitar that are pretty weird.
So was this design in your head, or did you sketch it out? Did you jot down notes?
No, actually, I'm making the first one from scratch. This guitar was found apparently in the Gibson dump. It was a Gibson thin line classical guitar. It looked like a regular classical in shape. It had a sound hole, phony one, but it had a sound hole with a rosette and a regular classical bridge. And it was horribly broken, gouged, broken. The neck was shattered. Somebody had intentionally broken it, probably so nobody would pick it up out of the dump. Some guy got it and tried to fix the neck with epoxy and made a mess of it. And I ran across it and got it on a good deal, and I made it for Sean, my friend, just so he would have an electric classical. It looked ugly. And then as time went on, we kept changing it. He and I redesigned the guitar to his needs. And it now doesn't even resemble the original guitar. The only thing that's left of the original guitar is part of the tuners and the backwood.
Okay.
The fretboard's been changed, the neck's been radically altered. The back, it's been hollowed out. It was a solid body guitar. I hand hollowed it.
And then you carved into it.
And I carved into, so there's almost nothing of the original. But even though it's an electric guitar, it still sounds pretty decent as an acoustic, which is good for practice.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And it has 28 frets. I forgot to mention that.
Oh my goodness.
Normally a guitar only has about, I think a classical has 19, and sometimes they go up to 21 or even rarely 24, but this has 28, which means you can play an awful lot of guitar and violin pieces on it. I mean, piano and violin pieces on it without transposing.
That's
which
fascinating.
is interesting to a lot of musicians who like to do that on a guitar.
Yeah.
But they have to mess with the octaves, and it makes it, you know, if you're going da 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 da, if you're having to mess with the octaves, you'd have to go da 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 da, you know.
Right, right.
And it doesn't sound the same. You can imagine singing Happy Birthday in 2 octaves.
Yeah,
it
right.
wouldn't. So this really opens up a lot of doors.
That's pretty great. Let's take a listen
Mm-hmm.
and a peek at Sean actually playing this.
Okay.
This is pretty amazing.
This is Sean Frenette. He owns this guitar.
On the L class, you can play anything, pretty much, from Bach to Hendrix. So, the L class is also a percussion instrument. It's basically an electrified piece of wood, particularly when I use one of the 2 pickups that has a more kind of ambient presence. I mean, I've had experiences where I just put my finger on the top of the neck and then go like that, and it picks up the sound of my skin leaving the wood. So that's a whole other universe of sound, kind of a microcosmos universe of small sounds, which I'm absolutely obsessed with. One of the other features is the singing hole. As you can see here, you can sing in through the top of it. Just one of the many amazing features of the L-class guitar.
So that was Sean.
Yes.
Amazing. Really, really interesting. And Sean is he's actually in school right now.
Yes, he's a senior at the New England Conservatory in Boston, studying under Elliot Fisk.
That's pretty amazing in itself.
Yes.
Very interesting. We'll have to remember Sean's face.
Oh, yeah, I'll see more of him. He's off the chart. I know a lot of really good guitarists, but he's just phenomenal.
That's fun. And it's neat that you have that connection, too.
Yes, well, he said, I met him the day after 9/11 at an open mic of all things. And he said it changed his life, and it certainly changed mine.
Wow.
Yeah.
I guess that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm his muse or he's mine. Maybe it works both ways.
It sounds that way.
Depending on the day, yeah.
You brought along another instrument, which isn't a stringed instrument.
No.
But can you tell me a little bit about the piece that we're going to see next?
Sometimes just for kicks, I make other instruments. Drums, I love drumming, and in this case, flutes, which I think are harder to make than guitars.
And this is a flute, but it's
Yeah.
kind of a special flute.
Yeah, it's a walking stick, you see. This is a piece of apple. This is a real pretty
Neat.
piece. It's got an eye on it.
Yes.
And it's all hand polished. I was in an automobile accident in 2002, and my ankles were rather badly crushed, and I walked with a cane for a long time, so if I got bored, I had something to do. I'm going to try to play a little bit of this if I can. Oops. Oops. I knocked it when I was moving, and it doesn't want to play now.
Does the bottom need to?
Oh, duh.
I got you. I put you off track.
Right, I got off. There we
No,
go.
that was
That's
my fault.
probably why it wasn't playing. And so forth. It has 3 octaves, actually.
Wow. That's really interesting. So what do you... I don't even know where to begin with this. How many instruments do you play?
Oh, I play around at a lot of instruments. You know, I'm a wannabe everything. I just recently bought an old broken cello and put it together because it's only got 4 strings, and maybe I can manage better than... I'm not a very good guitarist. That's why I build them, so somebody else can play them and entertain me.
But that's intriguing in itself. So regarding this flute, this is pretty neat too. Is this one big piece of wood?
This is bamboo, and this
Okay.
is a piece of apple that I
Let's see.
harvested from my nephew's yard in Idaho and dragged home in the car.
I like that you incorporate a little piece of your own life into these instruments.
Oh, I really try very hard to get as much of myself into everything I do, and my people, my friends, my whole world, actually.
That you can't help but wonder if that's not what makes them play so beautifully too.
Well,
I think there's something to be said for that.
if you could come see my shop, you'd see a board with a shattered flute on it. And it was one that I became rather obsessed with. It was gorgeous koa, and it was a beautiful flute, but it didn't play. And I kept fiddling with it, and finally one day I just broke it because it was just taking too much of my life away from me. I had better things to do. And as long as it was in one piece, I was going to fiddle with it, so I broke it. And I hung it up on my shop wall to remind me that everything isn't worth doing.
That's a really interesting lesson to have learned.
Oh, yeah, late in life, but I learned it.
I like that. That's really fascinating. Carla, we're out of time, but I wish we had a little more.
I've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you
Very
so much.
interesting.
Yeah.
Very talented.
Well, thank you, thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Behold, I am coming quickly, and my reward is with me to render to every man according to what he has done.